On my daughter's wedding day, I handed her an envelope with a gift, hoping for gratitude. But instead of smiling, she raised her glass and said she had always dreamed of having a different father. She hugged her father-in-law, and I left the hall. But when my daughter opened the envelope, the wedding turned into a nightmare. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. $45,000. Letitia's voice cut through the pristine air of her Bloomfield Hills townhouse like a blade through silk. I stood in her designer living room, my worn cap clutched between calloused hands, feeling like a stain on her perfect white furniture. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed off manicured lawns that probably cost more to maintain than my monthly pension. Everything gleamed: glass coffee table, chrome fixtures, artwork that looked expensive enough to feed a family for months. "Tia, sweetheart," I started, but she was already spreading wedding magazines across that spotless table, each one thick as a phone book and twice as glossy. "Look at this venue, Dad." She jabbed her manicured finger at a photo of some mansion with columns, the Towns and Hotel Ballroom. "This is where successful people have their weddings, where my friends are getting married." My throat felt dry. I'd brought my best hopes tonight, dressed in my least faded button-down, even polished my old work boots. The drive over, I'd practiced what to say about helping with her special day, maybe contribute a few thousand, help set up tables, whatever she needed. But 45,000. "The flowers alone are 8,000, she continued, flipping pages with aggressive enthusiasm. "The photographer is 5. "The dress I want is 3,500, but it's perfect. You should see it." I fumbled with my phone, trying to calculate. My savings account held $12,000. Every penny I'd managed to scrape together over 40 years at the Ford plant. Social Security barely covered my mortgage and groceries. "I have 12,000 in savings," I said quietly. "That's everything I can manage, but maybe with a small loan." Letitia's face transformed. The excitement died, replaced by something cold and sharp. 12,000? Seriously? She stood up, her voice rising. "Other fathers take out loans, sell cars, remortgage houses. What are you willing to do for your own daughter?" The words hit like physical blows. I'd raised this girl after Elena died, worked double shifts so she could have new clothes for school, sacrificed everything so she could go to college, and become the successful marketing professional she was today. "Tia, I could try for a loan, but 45,000. I gestured helplessly around her expensive living room. "You're doing well for yourself. Maybe we could find something more." "More what? Cheap?" She threw a magazine onto the table so hard it scattered others. "You know what Marcus's father is paying for his sister's wedding? 60,000. And that's considered modest in their family." Marcus, her fiancé, whose father owned half the restaurants in downtown Detroit. "I'm 35 years old, Dad. This is my one chance to have the wedding I deserve. My friends' fathers would move heaven and earth for their daughters. But you?" She looked me up and down, taking in my worn jacket, my nervous fidgeting. "You're just a failure." The word hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. "All my friends will have perfect weddings, and I have to settle for some backyard barbecue because my father can't provide what every other parent manages. Do you know how embarrassing that is?" I wanted to speak, to explain about the plant closing early, about medical bills from Elelina's cancer, about doing my best with what life gave me. But my voice wouldn't come. "You've had 35 years to figure out how to be successful, and this is what you have to show for it. $12,000. She walked to the door, her heels clicking on hardwood that probably cost more than my truck. "Just leave, Dad. I can't look at you right now." The door slammed with a sound that seemed to echo through my chest. I stood there for a moment in her perfect driveway, keys heavy in my hand, staring at my beat-up Ford, surrounded by her neighbors' luxury cars. The evening air felt thick, pressing down on my shoulders like Elena's disapproval from wherever she was watching. The truck engine ticked as it cooled in my driveway, but I couldn't bring myself to get out. Through the windshield, my house looked smaller than usual. A modest 1960s ranch with paint that needed touching up and gutters that sagged slightly on the east side. Nothing like Letitia's showcase. When I finally went inside, the silence felt heavy. I turned on the lamp by Elena's old reading chair, the one I'd never moved from its spot by the window. She used to sit there evenings planning Letitia's future, talking about college and careers, and the better life our daughter would have. The photos on the mantelpiece showed happier times. Letitia's high school graduation, her college degree ceremony, family dinners when Elelina was still alive. In every picture, I looked proud. Had I been fooling myself all these years? "Elelina, what would you do?" I spoke to the empty room, Our girl deserves happiness. Maybe I really am a failure if I can't give her what she wants. 40 years at the plant, and this is what I had to show for it. $12,000 and a daughter who called me a failure to my face. I walked to the kitchen table, where bills and bank statements lived in careful piles. The mortgage payment book showed 18 months left. I'd be debt-free at 70. My pension statement confirmed what I already knew. 1,800 monthly, barely enough for necessities. Social Security added another 800, but that money was already spoken for. But maybe. I picked up my phone and dialed the bank's 24-hour loan line. The automated system walked me through options until a human voice answered. "This is Jennifer. How can I help you tonight?" "Yes, I'm interested in a personal loan." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. $45,000. I can transfer you to someone who can discuss loan options. May I have your name and social security number? As I provided the information, I thought about Elena's reaction to such financial risk. She'd been the careful one, the planner, but she'd also been the one who said, "Love sometimes meant taking chances that scared you." The representative explained I'd need to come in for an appointment, bring documentation, discuss terms. The words washed over me like background noise. What mattered was the possibility. Maybe I couldn't be successful the way Dennis Hargrave was successful, but I could still be the father Letitia needed. She called me a failure. Maybe she was right. But failures don't love their daughters enough to risk everything. I found Elena's favorite tea in the kitchen cupboard, still there after 3 years. The smell brought back memories of her saying, "Drew, that girl is our greatest achievement, whatever it takes to see her happy." Tomorrow, I'd go to the bank. Tonight, I'd plan how to surprise Letitia with the full amount, plus my original savings. Maybe then she'd see that her old man wasn't quite finished yet. The alarm clock went off at 6:30 the next morning, but I'd been awake for hours. Chase Bank on Woodward Avenue looked more intimidating at 10 o'clock in the morning than it had any right to. Glass and steel reaching toward cloudy Detroit skies, security cameras tracking every movement, the kind of building where important financial decisions happen to important people. I straightened my best button-down shirt and checked the folder containing my documentation. Pension statements, Social Security papers, 40 years of steady employment history. Elena's voice whispered in my memory. "Stand tall, Drew. You're as good as anyone." The lobby bustled with activity. Young professionals in expensive suits handled transactions that probably involved more money than I'd see in a lifetime. I took my place in line behind a woman discussing investment portfolios with casual confidence. Next, the loan officer, a professional woman around Letitia's age, gestured me toward her desk. Her nameplate read, "Sandra Williams, Personal Banking. Mr. Gomez, please have a seat." "I understand you're interested in a personal loan." "Yes, ma'am. $45,000. It's for my daughter's wedding." Sandra's fingers clicked across her keyboard, pulling up my financial profile. Her expression remained neutral as numbers populated her screen. "I see you're retired from Ford Motor Company, 40 years of service. That's impressive. Your pension and Social Security provide steady income." She paused, reviewing details. "However, given your age and income level, there are some limitations we need to discuss." My chest tightened. What kind of limitations? "The maximum we can approve is $35,000. The interest rate would be 18% annually due to your age and fixed income situation." She turned her monitor toward me, showing calculations that made my head spin. "Are you certain about this commitment, Mr. Gomez?" 18%. I tried to calculate what that meant for monthly payments, but the numbers felt overwhelming. "Yes, I understand the risks. This is for my daughter." Sandra pulled out forms, her voice taking on a careful, professional tone. "The total repayment amount will be $52,000 over 5 years. Your monthly payment would be approximately $870, more than half my pension. She's worth every penny. Where do I sign?" The paperwork took an hour. Credit checks, identity verification, explanations of terms and conditions that felt like warnings. Other customers came and went, handling routine transactions while I made a decision that would change everything. Sandra explained the loan's impact on my budget with the kind of gentle concern reserved for senior citizens making questionable financial choices. But she processed the application anyway because the numbers barely worked. The credit approval came through faster than expected. Sandra printed documents, had me initial each page, explained payment schedules and late fee policies. The fluorescent lighting made everything feel clinical and serious, like signing away more than just money. "The funds will be available immediately as a cashier's check. Sandra said, sliding the document across her desk. Mr. Gomez, I want to make sure you understand this loan will significantly impact your monthly budget. I looked at the check. $35,000 plus my $12,000 in savings. $47,000 total, more than Letitia had demanded. Thank you, I said, tucking the check carefully into my jacket pocket. My daughter will be so surprised. Walking to my truck, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The pride of solving an impossible problem through sheer determination. Maybe I was just a factory worker, but I could still provide for my girl. The system had tried to stop me with age restrictions and income limitations, but love had found a way. I drove toward Bloomfield Hills with the cashier's check burning like hope in my pocket, already imagining Letitia's face when I handed her more money than she'd even asked for. The envelope felt heavier than it should. As I rang Letitia's doorbell 2 hours later, through the glass panels, I could see her approaching in comfortable home clothes, yoga pants and an oversized sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Dad? She opened the door with mild surprise. What are you doing here? I stepped inside, practically bouncing with nervous excitement. The living room looked different somehow. More wedding magazines scattered across surfaces. Expensive-looking vendor cards arranged like playing cards on the coffee table. Tia, sweetheart. I pulled the envelope from my jacket with ceremonial care. I took out a loan. Here's your $47,000 for the dream wedding. Her reaction wasn't what I expected. No gasp of joy, no grateful tears. Instead, she stared at the envelope like it was homework she'd forgotten about. Oh, Dad. Her voice carried a strange mixture of pity and annoyance. That's not needed anymore. Dennis is paying for the whole wedding. He said I deserve the best. The words hit like cold water. I stood there, arm extended, holding money that had cost me everything. But I took a loan at 18%. Well, just return it then. She waved her hand dismissively, already turning back toward her magazines. Dennis is doing this out of love for Marcus. Finally, someone understands I'm worth better than bargain shopping. Worth better. The phrase echoed in my head as I watched her flip through pages of expensive venues and designer dresses, all paid for by someone else's generosity. When did Dennis offer? I managed to ask. Yesterday afternoon. He called right after. She paused, realizing what she was about to say. Right after we talked, he said no daughter-in-law of his would settle for anything less than perfection. Yesterday afternoon, while I was at home, beating myself up for being a failure, planning to sacrifice my financial future, Dennis Hargrave had swooped in with his effortless wealth and made me irrelevant. Look at this venue. Letitia held up a glossy photo, her enthusiasm returning. The Townsend Hotel Grand Ballroom. Dennis booked it for the whole weekend. And this photographer, she did the governor's daughter's wedding last year. I pulled the envelope back to my chest, feeling foolish for ever thinking. $47,000 was impressive to people who lived in this world. The flowers alone will be $12,000, she continued, not noticing my silence. Dennis said, cost shouldn't matter when it comes to making me happy. Isn't that wonderful? Wonderful. Yes, it was wonderful that someone understood her worth. Someone who wasn't a retired factory worker living on a pension. Dad, are you okay? You look pale. Just tired, I lied, tucking the envelope back into my jacket. I should go return this to the bank. Good idea. No point in paying interest on money you don't need. She was already back to her magazines, planning a wedding, funded by someone else's love. I walked to the door, my footsteps echoing in the pristine hallway. Behind me, I could hear her humming as she turned pages, completely absorbed in dreams that no longer required my sacrifice. Thanks for thinking of me, though, she called out as I reached for the handle. It's sweet that you tried. Sweet that I tried, like a child's attempt at helping adults with real work. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes before starting the engine, staring at her house through windows that reflected nothing but my own confused face. 3 miles from Letitia's neighborhood, I had to pull over. My hands were shaking too badly to steer safely, and the envelope in my jacket felt like it was burning through the fabric. 40 years, I gave her everything, and to her, I'm just a backup plan, easily replaced by someone with deeper pockets. The parking lot of a closed auto parts store seemed appropriate. Empty, forgotten, like everything I thought I meant to my daughter. I turned off the engine and let the silence wash over me. Elalina, what would you say about our girl now? Would you still call her our girl if you saw how easily she dismissed 40 years of love? The drive home felt longer than usual. Detroit's industrial landscape rolled past my windows. Empty lots where factories used to stand, boarded up houses, the remnants of people who'd worked hard and got left behind. People like me. But first, I had business to handle. Sandra looked surprised when I walked back into Chase Bank 30 minutes before closing. Mr. Gomez, is everything all right? I need to cancel the loan. Early repayment penalty, whatever it costs. Her professional smile flickered with concern. Are you sure? We just processed this today. The penalty for early repayment is $500. I'll pay it. I don't need this loan. The paperwork took 15 minutes. Sandra kept glancing at me like she wanted to ask questions, but banking professionals knew when to mind their business. I signed forms, watched her process the cancellation, and handed back the cashier's check that had briefly represented my heroic sacrifice. Your checking account will be debited for the penalty fee by tomorrow, she explained, sliding a receipt across her desk. $500 for the privilege of being humiliated, money well spent. At home, the silence felt different, not heavy like before, but clean, somehow. I made Elena's favorite tea and sat in her reading chair, looking at the photos on the mantelpiece with new eyes. There was Letitia's high school graduation. In the picture, she was hugging me tight, whispering, "Thank you for everything, Dad. I couldn't have done this without you." College graduation. You made this possible. I'll never forget what you sacrificed for me. When had gratitude turned into entitlement? When had my love become something she managed rather than treasured? Maybe it's time I stopped begging for crumbs of appreciation from my own daughter. The wedding invitation sat on my kitchen table. Elegant cream cardstock with gold lettering, "The honor of your presence is requested." Honor. What an interesting word choice. I picked up the phone to call Letitia, then set it down. Tomorrow would be soon enough. Tonight, I needed to think about what kind of father I wanted to be for whatever relationship we had left. The tea was a Leonina's blend, chamomile and mint. She used to say it helped her think clearly. I sipped it slowly, watching the evening light fade through windows that needed cleaning in a house that needed repairs I couldn't afford since giving away my savings. But somehow, for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning came with unusual clarity. Instead of calling Letitia immediately like I usually did, I made coffee and read the newspaper cover to cover. When my phone rang at 8:30, I let it go to voicemail. "Dad, call me back. We need to discuss your outfit for the engagement party." Engagement party? This was the first I'd heard of it. I called her back 3 hours later. "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you." "Reading? What's this about an engagement party?" "Saturday night at Dennis's club. Nothing too formal, but..." Her voice shifted to that careful tone I'd started recognizing. "Actually, maybe it's better if you sit this one out. Dennis's friends will be there, and you understand? They're used to a certain level." "Level?" Like I was a step on a staircase she was climbing past. "What level is that, Tia?" "Well, professional people, business owners. They might not relate to..." She trailed off, letting me fill in the blanks about my inadequacy to a retired factory worker. Don't be like that. It's just easier this way. Easier. Everything about our relationship had become about what was easier for her. 3 weeks into April, the pattern became clear. Wedding planning meetings I wasn't invited to, vendor consultations scheduled when I was probably busy, a growing list of events where my presence would be awkward for people who mattered more than I did. By early May, our phone conversations followed a script. She'd call with demands disguised as requests, I'd offer help that wasn't sophisticated enough, and she'd find polite ways to exclude me from anything important. The dress-fitting invitation came with conditions. "You can come, but please don't talk too much and wear something nice." Actually, do you even have anything appropriate? I wore my best shirt and tie to the bridal salon in downtown Birmingham. The place looked like a jewelry store, all marble and crystal, with dresses displayed like precious artifacts. Letitia's friends were already there. 3 women in designer clothes, discussing their own upcoming weddings with casual mentions of photographers who charge more than my annual income. "Ladies, this is my father." Letitia's introduction carried an apologetic undertone. "He's very simple, but he means well." Simple. The word hung in the perfumed air like a judgment. I stood in the corner while they discussed dress alterations and reception details, feeling like museum security, present but invisible, there to watch but not participate. "Your father's sweet," one of them whispered to Letitia, loud enough for me to hear. "It's nice that you include him. Include him like I was charity work." That night, I drove to Woodland Cemetery for the first time since Elalina's birthday. Her grave was simple, a modest headstone with her name and dates surrounded by the daisies I'd planted 3 years ago. "Elalina, I can't live like this anymore." I knelt beside the stone, pulling weeds from around the flowers. She needs to know the truth. The cemetery was quiet, except for traffic from 8 Mile Road. I'd always found peace here, but tonight felt different. Tonight felt like a decision. You remember what the social worker said? Someday she might want to know about her real parents. Well, maybe someday is now. I drove home slowly, stopping at the drugstore for writing supplies. The letter took 6 attempts, each draft torn up and thrown away until I found words that felt right. The final version was simple, direct, true. When I sealed it in an envelope 2 days later, my hands were steady. The wedding invitation sat next to it on my kitchen table, and I noticed something that made my chest tighten. The ceremony time listed was different from what Letitia had told me. 2 hours different. I stared at the invitation until the numbers blurred, understanding exactly what my daughter thought of my importance to her special day. St. Paul Church looked magnificent in the May afternoon sun, its Gothic stone towers reaching toward cloudless skies. I pulled into the parking lot at 12:55, checking my invitation one final time. One Gusna ceremony. I'd timed everything perfectly. The organ music drifted through the heavy wooden doors as I approached the church steps. Strange. They must be playing prelude music longer than usual. I straightened my tie, the same black one I'd worn to Elena's funeral, and climbed toward the entrance. "Excuse me, are you going in?" A woman in an expensive navy dress hurried past me. "We're so late." "Late?" I checked my watch. 12:58. More guests streamed toward the church doors, their faces showing the mild panic of people arriving after something had already started. Through the thick oak doors, I could hear not just organ music, but voices, the ritualistic call in response of a ceremony in progress. "Oh, you're late too?" An older gentleman in a charcoal suit paused beside me, mopping his forehead with a handkerchief. The ceremony started at noon. Traffic on the lodge was terrible. My hand froze on the church door handle. Noon. Mine says 1. He pulled out his invitation. Cream card stock, identical to mine, except for one crucial detail. 12 Owenquok. He read, then looked at my invitation with genuine confusion. "That's strange. Are you family?" The words stuck in my throat. I'm the bride's father." His eyebrows rose with sympathy and embarrassment. "Oh, I thought that distinguished gentleman with the gray hair was her father, the one who walked her down the aisle." The distinguished gentleman with gray hair, Dennis. I compared our invitations side by side. His showed 12 p.m. in elegant script. Mine showed 1:00 p.m. in identical lettering. Both printed professionally, both appearing authentic, except mine had been deliberately altered to exclude me from the most important moment of my daughter's life. "Probably just a printing error," the man said kindly, but his eyes showed he understood the implications. Through the stained glass windows, I could see the ceremony in progress. Letitia, in white, radiant at the altar, Marcus beside her in his tuxedo, and there, in the front pew where I should have been sitting, Dennis Hargrave occupied the place of honor, reserved for the father of the bride. The father who had walked her down the aisle, the father who had given her away, the father who mattered. I stood on those stone steps, invitation trembling in my hand, understanding that 35 years of fatherhood had been erased with a simple printing change, reduced from the man who would proudly walk his daughter down the aisle to an unwanted afterthought, arriving too late to matter. The other guests had gone inside, leaving me alone with the weight of complete betrayal, not just excluded from the ceremony, deliberately deceived to ensure my absence from the moment that should have been mine by right. I folded the invitation carefully and walked back toward my truck, but stopped at the small park across the street. The sealed envelope in my jacket pocket felt heavier now, its contents no longer a last resort but a necessity. Some truths could no longer wait for a convenient moment. The park bench offered a clear view of St. Paul Church, where late guests continued hurrying inside to catch what remained of the ceremony. I sat with an envelope in my hands, watching their expensive cars fill the parking lot, understanding finally that I had never belonged in Letitia's new world. 35 years of lies is enough. Time for her to learn the truth. I opened the original envelope I'd brought as a wedding gift, the one that had once contained $47,000 in desperate sacrifice. Empty now, except for the letter I'd written during those long nights in May, when sleep wouldn't come. And Alelin in his memory whispered that some secrets were crueler than the truth. The handwritten pages felt substantial in my hands. 4 sheets of careful cursive telling the story Letitia had never heard. About the phone call that changed everything, about a 16-year-old girl who couldn't keep her baby, about Elena and me unable to have children, being offered a miracle we'd never expected. "My dear Tia," the letter began, "there are things you must know before you begin your new life. Things about who you really are and what you've lost today by choosing strangers over the man who raised you as his own." I folded the pages back into the wedding envelope. sealing it with the kind of finality that couldn't be undone. The money I'd originally planned to give her went back into my wallet. I was done being her financial resource. This gift would cost her something far more valuable than money. Elelenina, forgive me, but she needs to know what she really lost today. The church bells began their announcement that the ceremony was ending. Through the stained glass windows, I could see movement as the wedding party prepared for their triumphant exit. Soon they would move to the reception area, where guests would offer congratulations and presents, where I would blend in like any other guest, carrying my gift with patience and purpose. I stood from the bench, brushing dust from my suit, the same dark suit I'd worn to Elena's funeral, to Letitia's college graduation, to every important moment of our life together. Today, it would serve one final purpose. My reflection in my phone's camera showed a man I barely recognized, not the desperate father who'd begged for scraps of appreciation, but someone who understood his own worth, someone who would no longer accept being diminished. The envelope felt light in my hand as I crossed the street toward the church. Behind me, the park bench sat empty, marking the spot where Drew Gomez, the victim, had died, and someone else entirely had taken his place. The church doors opened as I approached, and the first wedding guests began emerging into the sunshine, their faces glowing with celebration. I joined the stream of well-wishers, moving with purpose toward the reception area. It was time to give my daughter the wedding gift she truly deserved. The reception area hummed with celebration as I entered, my envelope held casually at my side. Guests clustered around linen-covered tables, champagne glasses catching afternoon light through tall windows. The scent of expensive flowers filled the air, roses and lilies that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Letitia stood in the receiving line, resplendent in her wedding gown, greeting guests with the radiant smile I remembered from her childhood. Marcus beside her, Dennis hovering nearby like a proud patriarch, accepting congratulations for his generosity. I moved through the crowd purposefully, but calmly, other guests parting respectfully when they realized I was approaching the bride. The father of the bride, finally arriving to offer his blessing. Dad. Letitia's face showed genuine relief mixed with nervous energy. You came? I was worried when you weren't in the church. Sorry about the time confusion. Probably just a printing error. Her voice carried that practiced lightness she used when managing embarrassing situations. As if my exclusion from walking her down the aisle was merely an unfortunate mistake, rather than a calculated insult. Of course, I replied smoothly, stepping forward with my envelope. Just an error. Congratulations to you and Marcus. I presented the envelope with both hands, my voice taking on unusual gravity. Tia, I want you to have this gift. It's very important. Something in my tone made her actually look at me. Really look, for the first time in months. The envelope appeared ordinary enough, cream-colored like all wedding gift envelopes, but my serious expression gave her pause. Thank you, Dad. That's so sweet of you. Sweet. The same dismissive word she'd used when I'd tried to sacrifice everything for her happiness. Drew, Dennis approached with his arms extended, playing the gracious host. Finally, we meet properly. Letitia has told me so much about you. I turned to face the man who had replaced me, offering my hand with steady composure. I'm sure she has. You've been very generous to our family. Nothing's too good for my new daughter. Dennis beamed, his arms settling around Letitia's shoulders with casual ownership. She deserves the very best. The very best, which apparently didn't include the man who had raised her. Dad, let me introduce you to some friends, Letitia said, already turning toward other guests. She handed my envelope to Marcus absently. Put this with the other gifts, honey. I watched the letter disappear into Marcus's hands, then get placed on the gift table among dozens of other presents. Somewhere in that pile of ribbon and wrapping paper sat the truth that would change everything. Such a beautiful ceremony, a guest commented to me. You must be so proud. Yes, I replied, my eyes following Letitia as she moved through the reception, accepting congratulations and praise, very proud of how everything turned out. The photographer moved through the crowd, capturing moments of joy and celebration. I wondered if he'd photographed the gift-giving moment, preserving forever the instant when justice disguised itself as love. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server and found a place among the other guests, watching and waiting. Letitia was absorbed in her role as bride, greeting relatives and friends, basking in attention and admiration. The envelope sat unopened on the gift table, patient as a ticking clock. Soon enough, she would understand what it meant to lose a father who truly loved her. Soon enough, she would learn the difference between the man who had chosen to raise her and the stranger who had simply written a check. I sipped my champagne and smiled at fellow guests, playing the part of the proud father one final time. Crystal glasses chimed like wedding bells as guests gathered in a semicircle around the newlyweds. The Renaissance scents floor-to-ceiling windows framed Detroit's skyline in golden afternoon light, creating the perfect backdrop for Letitia's moment of triumph. "Everyone, please." She raised her champagne flute high, her voice carrying across the reception hall with practiced confidence. "I want to thank everyone who made this day possible." The photographer positioned himself to capture her radiant smile, the designer gown, catching light like spun silk. Around me, guests turned their attention toward the bride, faces expectant and warm. "Especially Dennis," Letitia continued, her eyes finding him in the crowd. "You've shown me what it means to have a father who truly cares. I've always wanted a different father, and finally, that dream has come true." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. The comfortable murmur of celebration died into shocked silence. I felt every eye in the room flicker toward me, then quickly away. Some guests stared at their shoes, others found sudden interest in the floral arrangements. The photographer's camera clicked, preserving the moment for eternity. "Dennis, you're the father I never had?" Letitia beamed, walking toward him with arms extended. "Thank you for showing me what real generosity looks like." Dennis embraced her with obvious pleasure, accepting the role she'd thrust upon him. His smile was triumphant as he held his new daughter, completely comfortable with replacing a man who'd devoted 35 years to raising her. "Letitia, you're the daughter I never had," he replied loud enough for everyone to hear. Around us, the silence stretched uncomfortably. A few guests attempted polite applause, but it died quickly when they realized the cruelty of what they'd witnessed. Others whispered behind hands, their faces showing the kind of secondhand embarrassment that comes from watching someone humiliate themselves publicly. I stood perfectly still, champagne glass steady in my hand, watching my daughter embrace her replacement father while dismissing 3.5 decades of love as inadequate. No anger showed on my face, no hurt, just the calm understanding that this was exactly who she'd always been and I'd finally stopped pretending otherwise. The gift table sat 20 feet away, my envelope buried among expensive presents from Dennis's wealthy friends. Soon enough, she'd discover what her cruel words had cost her. I set my champagne glass on a nearby table and walked quietly toward the exit. No dramatic scene, no confrontation, just a dignified man removing himself from a situation where his presence was clearly unwanted. Behind me, the reception gradually resumed its celebration. Guests pretending they hadn't witnessed a daughter publicly downing the man who'd raised her. The photographer continued capturing moments of joy, though several guests requested he delete the toast sequence. I pushed through the heavy doors into the parking garage, my footsteps echoing in the concrete space. The envelope with adoption papers waited patiently among wedding gifts, ready to teach Letitia the difference between wanting a different father and discovering you never had the one you thought you did. My truck started on the first try, reliable as always. I drove through Detroit's late afternoon traffic with unusual peace, watching familiar neighborhoods roll past my windows. 35 years of fatherhood were ending not with tears or anger, but with the quiet satisfaction of a job finally completed. At home, I moved through the rooms with purpose, selecting what mattered for the life ahead. Elolina's wedding ring went into my shirt pocket. Our photo from Letitia's college graduation, back when gratitude still lived in her eyes, found space in my travel bag. My work tools earned through decades of honest labor deserved better than gathering dust while I begged for crumbs of appreciation. The phone started ringing at 4:30. "Dad, we're opening gifts now." Letitia's voice bubbled with champagne excitement. "Some of these presents are incredible. Marcus's aunt gave us crystal from Ireland." I let it ring through to voicemail, continuing my methodical packing. The second call came 10 minutes later. "Dad, are you there? We found your envelope. What kind of gift needs to be opened privately?" The third call arrived as I folded my best shirt, the one I'd worn to her wedding, thinking I'd be walking her down the aisle. Her voice had changed by then, uncertainty creeping through the celebration. "Dad, I read your letter. This isn't funny. Call me back immediately." By the fourth call, panic had replaced confusion. "Dad, this can't be true. You're lying. Call me right now." I unplugged the phone and continued sorting through 35 years of memories, keeping only what served the future. The house felt different already, lighter somehow, as if removing the weight of obligation had made the walls themselves stand straighter. My phone buzzed constantly against the kitchen counter. 20 missed calls, 30, 44. Through voicemails, I listened to Letitia's voice crack as she processed the truth she'd never suspected. adopted at 3 years old after her parents died in a car accident, raised by strangers who'd chosen to love her. 35 years of lies. Not malicious deception, but the kind of protective love that shields children from painful truths until they're old enough to understand. You're not my real father. Then who am I? Where do I come from? Real father. Even in crisis, she couldn't recognize the difference between biology and choice, between conception and raising a child with unconditional love. Dad, please. I didn't mean what I said at the reception. Come back. But she had meant it. That was the problem. I loaded my truck as sunset painted the sky, orange and pink, Elena's favorite colors. The missed calls had reached 51 by the time I backed out of the driveway, taking one last look at the modest house where we'd raised someone else's daughter as our own. The adoption papers in that envelope told the whole story: names of birth parents who died too young, details of the accident that orphaned her, the joy Elena and I felt when social services called about a little girl who needed love. Letitia had spent the day choosing money over loyalty, status over sacrifice. Now she could live with the consequences of preferring strangers to the man who'd chosen to be her father when biology failed her. I-75 stretched south like a ribbon of possibilities. Detroit's skyline shrinking in my rearview mirror until it disappeared entirely. The radio played Sinatra, My Way, while evening light painted Michigan farmland in shades of gold and peace. 53 missed calls by the time I reached the Ohio border. I turned the phone off completely. Elena, I spoke to her photo on the dashboard. I finally did what needed doing. 35 years I gave love to an ungrateful child. Time to live for myself. The truck hummed contentedly at 65 mph, carrying me toward whatever came next. Cincinnati maybe, or Louisville, somewhere warm where winter wouldn't hurt these old bones. Where no one knew my story or expected me to justify my choices. Small towns rolled past my windows, places where people understood the value of honest work and reciprocated kindness, places where a 68-year-old retired mechanic could start fresh without apologizing for his limitations or begging for respect. My thermos held Elena's favorite coffee blend, bitter but warming. The road atlas lay open on the passenger seat, marked with possible destinations circled in red ink. Planning felt good after years of simply reacting to Letitia's demands and disappointments. Letitia, you wanted a different father, I said to the darkening highway. Now you have one. I hope Dennis is everything you dreamed he'd be. The adoption revelation would destroy her perfect wedding narrative. No more bragging about her generous new father figure. No more casual cruelty toward the man who'd changed her diapers, taught her to ride a bike, worked double shifts to pay for her college education. Instead, she'd face questions about identity and belonging that money couldn't answer. Who was she really? Where did she come from? What had she lost by choosing wealth over love? Dennis Hargrave could buy her expensive weddings and designer gowns, but he couldn't give her back 35 years of genuine devotion. He couldn't explain bedtime stories or homework help or proud moments at graduations. He couldn't replace the foundation of unconditional love she'd just discovered was built by choice, not obligation. The highway signs counted down miles to new possibilities. Toledo, Dayton, places where I could be just Drew Gomez, not the disappointing father of an ungrateful daughter. My truck's headlights carved through gathering darkness as I drove toward whatever tomorrow would bring. Behind me, Detroit held nothing I needed anymore. Ahead lay freedom I'd forgotten was possible. The phone stayed silent in my pocket, its 53 unanswered calls becoming ancient history with every mile. Letitia had made her choice long before today. The adoption letter simply helped her understand the full cost of choosing strangers over the man who'd chosen to love her when the world left her orphaned and alone. I was 68 years old, maybe 20 good years left. Maybe more. They belonged to me now. The radio played late-night classics as I drove into my new beginning. Elena's photo, catching dashboard light like a blessing. Behind us lay 3 decades of sacrifice. Ahead, stretched possibility and peace. Finally, I was free. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.